I got a real kick out of this one. This reminds me of some of the old school hacker pranks that used to occur back in the 90s. It's a little more, it's not as malicious and a little more fun to it, I think.
Definitely, but it's definitely something that shouldn't be attempted lightly, right?
Right.
It also reminds me of back when I was learning cybersecurity on my own. So apparently, I think in the UK, this high school student decided one day he was bored and was going to explore vulnerabilities, I guess, in IoT devices. And so he figured he was going to basically send a print job to 150,000 printers in the UK. So when you read the story on Vice, it's actually pretty interesting because it's an interview with this person and kind of asking them, hey, what were you thinking while you were doing this? And why did you do all of these things? But some of the pictures interspersed in there are really kind of clever. You know, he created basically, for some reason, a lot of the printers that are connected to the internet and listening on some of these ports like 9100, I think 631 and 515, they're basically POS systems. For some reason, these POS systems, so the little like receipt printer is connected to the internet. That doesn't make too much sense to me, and I'm sure it's probably inadvertent, but basically these receipts were coming out all day long with, you know, pictures of little robots with little messages that say, hey, your printer is now part of a botnet.
Right.
And so I can see how it was clever for this high school student, but I'm sure, you know, it was frustrating to a lot of the like business owners who didn't know what was happening.
To be fair, they weren't made part of a botnet, am I right?
That's correct. So even, you know, when the interview took place, you know, he admitted it wasn't really part of a botnet. I think the interviewer even asked him, so why'd you say it was? And I think you could see that he's a kid, he's messing around, he thinks it's funny, even though it's probably not something to take lightly, to just go and kind of do this because of the unintended consequences. I mean, I think a lot of people took it kind of lightheartedly, but not everybody, I'm sure, you know. Imagine if you have, like, in your local coffee shop, some kind of, you know, you're trying to check your customers out and you can't because these little bot messages, while funny, maybe, arguably funny, right? They're coming out and you're not able to do business. So I think for some people it wasn't as funny as it was for him. I think, you know, he was being clever, and one of the things I found touching during the interview is that, you know, he mentioned that he didn't think he had an outlet for his skills with all of the things that he was doing. So he mentioned that in high school, you know, he tried to like do responsible disclosure on some bugs, and when he did that, people told him, well, don't go snooping around. So they didn't treat his findings in a way that kind of gave him, I guess, an outlet or encouraged him in a positive way.
Right.
Whereas, you know, they could have taken that and probably, you know, made him go on the right path. They probably kind of discouraged him, and he was like, oh, well, I'm just going to do whatever I want. So I think especially with young people or people like me, right, when I was young, I also had a lot of ideas. Hey, let me like hack away, right? But something inside me told me, hey, there's a line here that you shouldn't cross. And I think as you're learning about cybersecurity, you either need like a mentor who's going to help you get through that, so you can understand that, hey, it's important to do these things responsibly. You know, yes, it's good that he knows about these vulnerabilities and he wants to illuminate the problem. And I think he did that, but it's possible he could have caused like outages or something more serious. So there is something to be said about, you know, not just going and doing things, you know, like haphazardly, kind of like he did. But it was clever, it was fun. Some of the Twitter pictures were kind of interesting to look at. People were like, wow, I'm amazed, who has such skill to kind of commandeer all these printers. I'm getting a kick out of it, but I'm sure not everybody felt that way. And you know, one thing that he mentioned that he thought would have helped him to channel his creativity or his energy was competing in like a CTF or something like that. He actually made reference to that. And I find that that's actually is the right, you know, would have been something that would have helped him, because I know for me, participating in some of these things like CTFs or challenges or educational opportunities has always helped me to not only kind of like up my skills, but also learn the proper way to like take up my time so I don't do something mischievous.
I know you, Stan. I'm fairly sure you've done a few mischievous things.
The thing that gets me about this, though, is 150,000 printers should not have been accessible on the internet.
Absolutely.
Printers have no business on the internet. They ought to be, and if you're going to offer public Wi-Fi in a Starbucks or whatever, then you need to make sure that your printers and your POS terminals are firewalled off from the public Wi-Fi. That's just the part that drives me nuts here. Is how did we get 150,000 printers in the UK that were all accessible from the internet? Those are not ports that need to be accessible from the outside. You don't offer, printing services to the universe.
Oh, I agree.
Especially on a POS system. I think that was the most shocking thing for me.
Well, I think that was part of it, is that they all seem to be using the same set of protocols. Now, there were 3 different ports that he was scanning. Then he also mentioned he actually had found a vulnerability in a certain Xerox printer web interface and was submitting print jobs through that. So 4 different ways. And it is kind of interesting to see in the Twitter feed the different printers and how they each handled the job, because some of them were printing out on the little, receipt printer. Some of them are full page. Other ones they're all printing in different ways, but they're all getting the same job, which is kind of neat in my opinion.